We are now streaming live.
Wow.
Oh, I did it again. If you're out there and watching, happy to join us. I'm Jayne and Krentz, and I'm here today to discuss some great summer reading recommendations with the real authorities in the field. John Charles from the Poison Pen Bookstore. A lot of you may know that Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale. Fabulous store, does a wonderful job with mail order. And my writer friend, Christina Dodd. Hi, Christina. Hi, John.
Hi,
And
Christina.
I won't give a long dissertation here because we got lots of books to get through, but I do want to say that there's a complete list of the books with the links at Christina's website. So if you want the whole convenient list after this is over, check her website. And this is all about current books or upcoming, pretty, yeah, right. This is what's out there now if you're looking for something fresh to read. So take it away, John Charles.
Thank you, Jayne, and thank you, Christina. The first book I want to share with you is called The Third Wife of Faraday House by B.R. Myers. In this particular book, our heroine is Emmeline Fitzpatrick, and she's desperate to escape her life in foggy Halifax. Her guardians are trying to match her up with some rather repulsive suitors, but Emmeline has her eye on a dashing Navy lieutenant in the Canadian Navy. But that doesn't come to pass because Emmeline finds herself caught up in a scandal, which forces her to accept an offer of marriage from the enigmatic Captain Graves. Now, she's accepted the offer to be married. She travels to Faraday House, which is Captain Graves' ancestral home. But once she gets there, she discovers there's just a little problem. Before she can marry Captain Graves, they have to do something about his second wife, who's still alive. Yeah, that was a shock to Emmeline too. Though when she gets there, everyone assures her it's just a matter of days, if not hours, before the second Mrs. Graves goes on her way to her heavenly reward. But as Emmeline is there in Faraday House, she starts to have some questions. I mean, there's all these kind of spooky things happening, music playing in the music room at night, surly servants who kind of glare at her. Her husband to be doesn't really have answers as to why he wants to marry her. There's rumors of a curse that have struck down the first Mrs. Graves and now is working on the second Mrs. Graves, which leaves Emmeline wondering, is she going to be the next Mrs. Graves or the next victim of the curse? So that's the setup for the book. And as you can tell, it's like the quintessential Gothic, even though it was written just this summer. What makes it interesting and new is the Canadian setting, which is kind of different for Gothics. It's set around the time of 1812, so it's like the war between when America and the British were fighting with each other. So it's got a little bit of that involved. But it has all those hallmarks that you look for. Uh, Emmeline is torn between Captain Graves, who's brooding and dark and mysterious, and then there's another man on the island who's kind and warm and friendly, and you think, which one is she going to go with? That's the typical Gothic setup for that, but it's got all those elements. It's really just so much fun. If you like classics like Rebecca or Victoria Holt, The Third Wife of Faraday House by B.R. Myers would be something to add to your reading list.
It's going on my list. Sounds great.
You just convinced me.
Oh, I had so much fun with it. I never read her. And apparently her book previous to this is very Gothic too, so I'll have to search that out. Now, this book will be coming. It's not quite out yet. It's out next month. It's called Someone in the Attic by Andrea Mara. The author is Irish. This is her first book to be published in the US. And in the book, it opens with a woman at home in her house in Dublin. She's had a long, hard day. She's taking a warm bath to enjoy herself, enjoying some wine. She's maybe on her second glass, and she is alone in the house when she starts to hear these little noises that she sometimes hear, making you wonder, is it the house settling? Is it just the wind brushing against the windows? What's going on? What the woman doesn't know, but what the reader knows is as she's sitting in the bath, the hatch to the attic is slowly being lowered down. A figure in black that's masked is creeping into the house. And well, let's just say the woman doesn't have to worry too much about what's going on into her house after that. Meanwhile, across Dublin, there's another home. Anya is there. Anya has moved to Dublin from America with her husband, now her ex-husband, but they're very amenable about the marriage. It's not a bitter split, and their two children. And Anya's trying to get things done. It's the end of the day. She's come home from work. She's got to fix dinner for the kids. They're being annoying as kids can be, wanting her attention. And her daughter keeps saying, "You have to look at this, Mom. You have to look at this." And so finally, Anya pulls her attention away from what she's doing, looks at the phone her daughter's holding up, and her daughter says, "This is our house. This is our house," on the phone. And Anya looks at it, and there's this video of someone masked climbing out of an attic and going into this home that seems to be deserted. And it kind of looks a little bit like their home, but Anya's thinking, really, that's not possible because they're there. How could someone be taping these things and doing these things without someone noticing it? But then the next day, another video pops up that's similar to that, and then another one. And it seems like there's this trend in Ireland at the time where people would film themselves all masked and disguised, creeping into other people's homes. It was a social media phenomenon. So Anya's wondering, is that what's happening, or should she be worried about this? That's the premise of Someone in the Attic, and she's the author on Andrea. Mara has a really wonderful way at creating suspense in the stories. Those little things like, why is noises coming from the attic when there shouldn't be anyone up there? How can someone be getting into a house in a gated community without you being aware of it? Should you really worry about things like this? I think probably the best way to summarize this book is you shouldn't be afraid to be alone in the house. You should be afraid that if you're not alone in your house. And that's the premise of this story. Really, it's not graphic or gory or anything like that, but it's wonderfully spooky. The author does a great job at shifting suspicion, like, is there someone in the neighborhood that could be doing it? Do they have motives? Things like that. Just really an excellent first US debut for American readers, introduction to Andrea Mara, Someone in the Attic. Even you would like it, Christina. It's not too spooky.
You scared me to death just talking about it.
It's not my alley though. I'll
Yeah.
check it out for sure.
It's very much if you like Riley Sager or authors like that, then you probably would get into the particular book.
My time.
The next one I want to talk and share with you, some of you may have already read, but if not, you're in for a treat. It's called Look on the Bright Side by Kristen Higgins. Empathy is a wonderful thing in a doctor. You want your doctor to be empathetic. But some people might say Lark Smith has just a little bit too much empathy. Now, Lark is an oncologist in a hospital in Boston, the Boston area, and she's had to give difficult news to some of her patients. That's just part of the process in dealing with oncology. But the problem is, most of the time, it's Lark's patients that are comforting her rather than her comforting her patients. So finally, the head of the hospital has had enough. He just can't deal with this. So he tells Lark, "I'm moving you. I'm putting you into emergency services, the emergency room. You're going to work there because you won't be able to get attached to people. You'll have to make decisions quickly. They come in, they go out. You're not responsible for them in the long term. It's a short-term kind of medical situation." Well, Lark hates that. Her whole life has been dedicated to the field of oncology. That's what she wanted to do. And now she's being forced to do something that she really doesn't want to. And that's when the hospital's celebrated surgeon, Lorenzo Santini, or as they call him in the hospital, Dr. Satan, comes into the picture. Now, Lorenzo has a proposition for Lark. If she will agree to be his fake girlfriend, basically for a few months in the summer, because he has a family wedding coming up and things like that. And with a nickname like Dr. Satan, let's just say he's not having much luck getting dates. If she agrees to be his girlfriend, she'll introduce him to the head of oncology at one of Boston's premier hospitals. Sounds like the perfect arrangement. I mean, after all, Lark can agree to go on a few dates with Dr. Satan. It's just for a month or so. What's the worst that could happen? And that's the premise of Kristen Higgins' Look on the Bright Side. I love Kristen's books because she's able to not only make you laugh, but make you cry and make you appreciate both qualities. And it's a book that really takes a serious look at some things in life, like dealing with love and loss and death. And as you read the book, you understand why Lark chose oncology as her field. of study, but she also has just this amazing sense of humor. So it's just that whole experience in a book. It's the perfect beach read or read any time of the year. Look on the Bright Side by Kristen Higgins.
She kind of crosses into,
Women's fiction.
yeah, I would categorize,
Fiction.
but the beach read has become kind of women's fiction or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, she's good any time of the year, but especially she captures that New England kind of setting so well that you really feel like you're there during the summer.
Yeah.
The next book is one that was new to me. I just discovered it this month. It's called The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. Durst has written other books, primarily young adult novels, some middle school fiction. She's won awards for them. I think this is her first adult fantasy novel, and I just completely fell in love with it from the first page. The book features Keela Oberdon, who's always had trouble dealing with people. And fortunately for Keela, that hasn't been a problem up until now because she spent the last 10 years working as a librarian at the Great Library of Elysium. And all she's had to deal with is books, not people. But now things are changing. There's kind of a revolution going on in the empire. Um, a populist revolt is forming and bubbling up, and it's gotten to the point where the revolutionaries have attacked the city. They're after the emperor, but they've attacked the city, including the library where Keela works. So she has to escape. She manages to get out before the building goes down with a few boxes of spell books and her sentient spider plant named Kaz. So if you can think kind of as a plant that acts a little bit like a dog, then that kind of gives you an idea of who Kaz is. Well, Keela doesn't know what to do, but she decides she's going to get as far away as she can. So she goes back home to an island on the distant fringes of the empire where she grew up. And when she arrives there, she discovers things are pretty much the same. The house where she and her parents lived is still there. They've kind of left it to her. It's a little bit dusty and needs some repair, but she can make it work. The villagers seem very nice, the residents there, if a little bit worn around the edges too themselves. But there's a problem. Keela has to figure out what can she do to support herself because in the library, food would appear. She was taken care of. All she had to do was manage books, but now she's got to figure out how to support herself and Kaz. So while she's going through her spell books, she has like a couple boxes that she's rescued. She stuck them in a back bedroom. She discovers a spell that will help things grow and like a garden. So she decides to test it out. She goes back to her poor little neglected garden behind the cottage, does the little spell that the book says, and within hours, tomatoes are blooming, fruits ripening, the raspberry bushes are filled with tons of berries, and that gives Keela an idea. She's going to take the raspberries she has, she's going to turn them into jam. She's going to open a little jam shop in her home, in her cottage, and that's the cover for how she'll make a living. But what she's really going to be doing is providing people with the spells they need, because up until that point, the emperor spells were for the elite and for the ruling class. The common people were not allowed to have magic. So that kind of sets up the premise of the spell shop. And it's just such a refreshing change because it's very low drama in the best possible way. There's lots of interaction between the villagers. There's a little bit of a romantic interest in her neighbor who manages the mirror horse herd that kind of roams around the island. There's a lot about books, about magic, but it's hard to explain, but in a time when things are so fraught with political turmoil and just everyone just wants to escape, this is a way to escape in the best possible way. There's a couple reviews that kind of, I think, summarized it better than I can. One of them called it a Hallmark rom-com full of mythical creatures and fueled by cinnamon rolls and magic. And the other one said that it was a whimsical cottagecore romantasy. So it's kind of building on that trend in fantasy being more cozy, that kind of cottagecore element. It's just so sweet and just so lovely. And it just, if you're looking for an escape in the best possible way, The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst is the answer to you. And the Poison Pen, she was here for an event a few weeks ago. She's as delightful in person as her books. We have like a few signed copies left. So if you're interested, that would be one to leap on. Next book I would like to talk about is called Nice Work, Nora November by Julia London. I've been reading Julia, gosh, for more than 20 years, I think. She's one of those authors that has such a unique, distinctive voice that it doesn't matter what she does. I'm just drawn to her books. I've loved her historical romance. I've loved her contemporary romance. I've loved what she's done with women's fiction or relationship fiction, which is kind of where this book falls in. And it starts out with Nora November, our protagonist, wondering, does she really want to come back to life? Because what's happened is Nora's been involved in what they're calling a surfing accident. She's temporarily been underwater for a long period of time. She's clinically been dead for like a minute or two, but medical professionals have pulled her back to life. She's recuperated. She's back in the hospital. She's ready to go back to her normal life. And she discovers she hates it all. I mean, she has a job that she can't stand. She's working as a personal injury lawyer in the family law firm. Her father, who runs the law firm, has made it very clear that he only accepts her in the business because he doesn't have a son. So she's like a second best choice for him. She doesn't like personal injury law to begin with because it involves dealing with large corporations and trying to basically get a dime out of a little person. Professionally, she's not happy. Personally, she's kind of feuding with her older sister, and she wishes she had a better relationship with her. There's no one who's mourned her romantically since she's come back. She really hasn't had a relationship in months, if not years. The only man that she's met that interests her was a few months ago when she was at a convenience store that was robbed and she was held hostage with a stranger. And they bonded that night. They kind of clicked, like you have that instant chemistry. He shared his phone number with her, but she made the mistake of not doing anything with it and now can't find it. So that's where Nora is at the start of this book, when she decides she's going to come up with what she calls her reverse bucket list. She's going to make a list of all the things she wanted to do in life, but never did because she was afraid or didn't have the time or didn't want to, but she's going to do them, starting with finding the mystery man that she met a few months ago. Another thing she's going to do is she inherits her late grandfather's community garden plot. She's going to try to make a go of that because gardening was so important to him and she loved kind of sharing that aspect of his life. And then she also gets involved with a troupe of geriatric thespians whose theater is about to go under. It sounds crazy, but it's all so relatable in Julia London's hands. She has a wonderful sense of humor. She's just so smart and thoughtful. And there are points in the book where you kind of think to yourself, what about my life? Are there things that I would have liked to have done, things I still want to do, things that I could do if I just took a chance? And that's Nice Work, Nora November by Julia London.
I enjoyed that one too. I like that, yeah. And
Yeah.
I agree with you. The voice is, it's a serious subject about redoing your whole life, but Julia London has the voice to do it with and make it appealing and charming and engaging.
Yeah, she really, I mean, she's done Scottish Regency historicals that are funny and wonderful. She's done a series with dogs and their pet owners that fall in love, and one about, I think, a Texas kind of ranching billionaire family that almost was right out of Dallas that she made think, no, that's not going to be good, but it's wonderful. She just has that ability. She just can, much like you, Jayne and Christina, she can switch back and forth between
I haven't read
genres.
this one, but I've read her before and she's fabulous. She just, yeah, very engaging.
The next one I'd like to share with you is called The Windsor Conspiracy by Georgie Blaylock. In the book, we're introduced to Amelia Montague. Now, she's gone against her family's wishes. She's married a man they didn't approve of, and they're making her pay the price by isolating her, by kind of cutting her out of the family. And Amelia doesn't care at first, but then her husband dies. She's a widow without means of financial support. And that's when her family comes back in. One of her relatives offers the opportunity to go work for Wallace Simpson as her private secretary. And the hope is that Amelia will kind of be a moderating influence on Wallace Simpson, kind of keep her out of the headlines, keep her a little bit more on the straight and narrow. And that's the hope. But of course, that doesn't turn out to be the reality, because once Amelia is there, she discovers Wallace Simpson is a force of her own. She's going to do what she wants, up to and including when the Germans invade France, invade Paris, where they're staying. And Wallace and her husband decide it's every man and woman for themselves and leave Amelia behind to kind of, I guess, hope for the best. Well, Amelia does get out. She has no illusions now about Wallace and her husband, Edward, and she wants nothing more to do with them when the American government kind of come up to her, someone from the Secret Service, the CIA, one of those shadowy government agencies. I guess it would be the OSS at that particular point in time. And they want her to go back to work for Wallace, who's now in Bermuda with Edward, and kind of do some work for them. In other words, they want Amelia to spy on Wallace and report back. And that's kind of the premise of the Windsor conspiracy, but it's based on historical fact. Wallace Simpson and her husband Edward, not to mince words, but kind of did like the Nazis more than they should. They were
Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah, did not have a problem with them.
yeah, anything they could do to gain power or get back into what they thought was their rightful place, they would accept it. And so it's fascinating from that perspective, because you see this power couple of the time from the perspective of someone who sees them for what they really are. I love Georgie's book. She's done a number of fascinating historical settings. This one brings all of the elements that I look for in her books, vivid historical details, interesting characters, and of course, at the end, she has some historical notes about what she's done to the story. So if you like historical fiction, especially World War II set, The Windsor Conspiracy by Georgie Blaylock. And would one of you like to do something to break it up?
Go for it, Christina.
Okay, all right. The first one I've got, I don't actually have. I read a manuscript for Vanessa Kelly for Murder in Highbury, which
Oh.
comes out in October. And it's basically Emma after she's married to Mr. Knightley. And she walks into the chapel on the very first page, and there's a dead body. So basically, it's Emma, the one that we all know and love from the Jane Austen book, who's solving a crime. And it's funny and it's charming. It's this visit back to the Jane Austen world. It's going to do marvelously well. And I was going to get an advanced reading copy when I was at the American Library Association, but people were grabbing them so fast I didn't get one. But otherwise, it's a lovely cover. I actually put it up on the website so that you can see, because I enjoyed it. It was fun.
This is her first foray into historical mystery. She's done a lot of historical romance, I think.
Yeah, it's very clever. I mean, it was just, for those of us that wish we could live in Jane Austen's time, it was just the visit to a couple that you really wanted to do.
John, I gotta ask, are you sitting with the sun in your eyes there?
Yeah, it's probably right about that time in Scottsdale.
Do you want to move or shift? Feel free.
Uh,
Shut the blind? Can you shut the blind?
oh, no, that's the blinds are shut. That's the sun coming through the blinds.
This is Scottsdale, yeah. Okay. Well,
I think we'll have to roll with that.
okay.
Another book I'd love to share with you was an introduction to this author for me, and I'm so glad I discovered her. The book is called The Starlets by Lee Kelly and Jennifer Thorne. They've written one other book before this, which I have to find now because I love this book so much. But in The Starlets, we're introduced to Vivian Rhodes. She's an actress in Hollywood. This is the late 1960s. She's been working for years. She's kind of on the fringes, but she's never broken through. But now she thinks she's finally going to get her big break that's going to push her up to that level where Elizabeth Taylor is now at. And that's the starring role in a picture called Helen of Troy. It's one of those swords and sandals epics from the 60s that were being made at the time. It's a blockbuster. It's going to resurrect her career. It's going to put her on the map in Hollywood. Well, Vivian arrives at the island in Italy where they're filming it, Tivoli, and she discovers it's not quite the setup that she thought it was. She has not been hired to play Helen in the picture. She's been hired to play one of the secondary characters, Cassandra. And if that's not bad enough, the person who's been cast in the role of Helen is her professional nemesis, the fiance stealing Lottie Lawrence, who's been billed as America's sweetheart. So you have to kind of think Debbie Reynolds or somebody like that playing that role. So that's the dynamics. Vivian is pretty sure she wants nothing to do with the film. Lottie is trying to ingratiate herself to Vivian because she's always felt bad about it wasn't her fault. She took her Vivian's fiance, but it just happened, that kind of thing going on. But what happens is several days into the production, shady things start happening on the set. People are disappearing to another part of the island. There's rumors about ships docking and leaving late at night. It's just very odd. And then one evening, while Vivian's out walking after dinner, she goes down to where they're storing the props and things like that in this big kind of cave area, and she stumbles across a body. So, of course, you immediately know things are shady on the island of Tavali. Well, Vivian has this knowledge. She doesn't know what to do with it. It seems like there is something going on. She could be in danger. The only person she can turn to now for help and assistance is Lottie. So that sets up the story. They have to get off the island, get this information about what's going on Tavali to the proper authorities. And to do so, they're going to have to work together. In some ways, it reminded me of those old movies with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, the on pictures,
Yeah,
where
right.
they're both kind of fighting, but you can tell there's some form of friendship there, even though they're kind of rivals and things like that. But it has that sense of humor. It also has a wonderful, both authors just have the details of that time period down. At one point, they're in Rome, the two women, and they try to get onto the set of Ben-Hur that's being filmed there with Charlton Heston, because they're hoping that they can get to his agent and the agent can get to the proper authorities. But it's got all those little movie making details down. It's got all the fascinating Hollywood gossipy things that I love to read in a book, but it's also got some realistic elements about what, I won't say too much because I don't want to ruin it, about what the danger is and what's going on the island at that time. So if you like historical fiction, especially with a Hollywood setting, The Starlets by Lee Kelly and Jennifer Thorne comes out in August pretty quickly.
That feels like a new era that is being opened up for women's mystery and fiction and stuff like that. But and it's coming out of the glamour side of the 60s, the Hollywood glamour side. Yeah, interesting.
And if you love movies, it's got all those details. Their previous book was called The Antiquity Affair, which is being billed as a female version of Indiana Jones. So, of course, I want to read that one now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Another one that I really enjoyed earlier this summer, that's, I think, a first book by an author. She might have written some children's books, but it's called The Funeral Ladies of Ellery County by Claire Swinarski. Now, Esther Larson has been cooking for funerals in the North Woods of Wisconsin for more than 50 years. Together with a few of her lady friends at the Catholic Church, they've taken care of the mourners, the people that come to funerals, and that's their job. They love it because Esther has always firmly believed that there's nothing a warm casserole can't help to mitigate.
Very
So
true.
that's, I mean, you can tell she loves her community, she loves her friends, she's got her place. In fact, Esther might be too kind, because one of her friends that she meets online effectively takes her for just about every penny she has.
Oh.
Esther swears to her family that the woman she met is sincere, that she's going to get the money back. She was just in a difficult marriage. She had to get out of it. That's why Esther sent her all this money. It's coming. But her family, of course, is thinking Esther's been duped. And it's gotten to the point where Esther's going to lose her house, the family home, because it's been up for mortgage now and things are going bad financially. Yeah, it's definitely not a good situation. Esther's such a nice person and people can't stand it that she's been taken advantage of. That's where her granddaughter Iris comes in. Iris is going to do something to help her grandmother keep her house. And what the idea she gets comes when there's another family that's come into town. It's Cooper Johnson, I think is his name. He's come in because his stepmother has died. He wasn't really close to her, but she liked his stepmother. His sister, who's been living with the stepmother, is there, and he's going to effectively become her guardian. Their father is a celebrity chef who's pretty much out of the picture. He's always either filming a show or doing something. So Cooper is going to be the one responsible for his younger sister. Esther or Iris meets Cooper, and they come up with the idea of a community cookbook that could save Esther, because if the church group contributes recipes, if Cooper can get his father, the celebrity chef, to kind of push it, that could save Esther financially. So that's the story that sets up the plot in The Funeral Ladies of Ellery County by Claire Swinarski. It's thoughtful and heartwarming. It doesn't shy away from the realities of life. Like, families are not always the people that you want them to be. Sometimes you have to take them for who they are. It's a lot about community and how important that is. And also there's a lot about food in the book. So of course we like that.
That has become enormously popular too, food in the books.
Yeah.
Well, that's because it is enormously popular among most of us.
People like food, yeah, yeah. I don't
And-
know, it's like having animals in the books. It speaks to a lot of other things about the characters, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Another book that's in a similar literary vein that I discovered as a debut, and I always love discovering a first-time author and helping them, is Dear Dottie by Jacqueline Westlake is the book. Ever since she could remember, Rosie Benson has had someone she could turn to for advice in her life, and that person was her great aunt Dottie. It didn't matter what the situation, what the problem was, Dottie always had some words of wisdom that would help Rosie reconcile what was going on. But now things have changed. Dottie is no longer around for Rosie to ask her advice. Dottie's had an unexpected accident. She's no longer with the family. They're dealing with that loss. And Rosie especially, because that Dottie's been kind of the benchmark person in her family that she kind of turned to. As Rosie's going through Dottie's belongings, they're clearing out her home to prepare it for sale. She also discovers that as well as she thought she knew her great aunt Dottie, she really didn't know her at all. She was discovering these photos of Dottie that with people she had no idea who they were. She's discovering all these things. So what Rosie decides to do is she goes into Dottie's email account, sets up an email that lets all the people in her contact list know that Dottie has passed away, and this is her grandniece, Rosie, who would like them to, if they want to share any memories or any thoughts they might have about Dottie with her. That sets up the story. And as Rosie learns more and more about her great aunt, she discovers possibly a path for her to navigate her own life through the responses she gets back. It's just really sweet and charming. And Rosie is also she's got fired from her new latest job, and she's been hired by like a job placement firm that kind of reminds me of The Devil Wears Prada. You've got those scenes in the books where she's working for this woman who's totally out of control. There's also an animal rescue farm that her great aunt was involved, that Rosie becomes involved with too. It's, if you're just looking for something that will kind of take you away from turmoil and stress and all the bad things and restore your hope that things can be good, Dear Dottie by Jacqueline Westlake is the book for you. And again, it's a debut, so I'm looking forward to her next book next summer. Jayne, do you want to share one?
Well, on your recommendation via Christina, I think you actually told Christina about this book, and then she told me that you had recommended it. Play the Fool by Lena Chern, Chern. And Play the Fool is about a young woman who is still trying to make it, trying to find her place in the world. She's currently selling little tchotchkes out of a Russian shop that was probably run by the Russian mob in a mall that's dying. And life is not looking up. And she encounters another woman, tattooed, totally cool, and totally non-judgmental. And suddenly she wants to have a new friend. This is somebody she can be friends with. And then she's just the friendship is just kicking off. And then somebody walks into the Russian mob shop, and our heroine, Lena, who reads tarot, realizes that he's just come from a murder. And the murdered person appears to be her new best friend. And it takes off from there. And it's all about a young woman who's not that young anymore and has no excuses for not having found herself in the world. But it's all about her coming into her own and finding out what really went on with her missing friend. And it also is kind of an interesting look at the tarot, which everybody knows the beautiful tarot cards, but I don't know much about, the actual experience of reading them. And what I learned from the book is that it's subject to a lot of interpretation. But somehow our heroine, through interpreting the tarot, solves the crime. And I think it's going to be the start of a series. It has the feel of a start of a series. So thanks for the recommendation on that one, John.
Oh, you're welcome. They've actually scheduled the next one for next summer, so it's in the works. Yeah, I thought it's one of those times where when it first came out, I kind of glanced at it, thought it looks interesting, but let it go by. But then it won the Mystery Writers of America Mary Higgins Clark Award, which is like a big deal. So it's like, okay, now I need to go back and look at it. And she's got that unique voice, the writer. It comes across in her characters. And the idea of having someone read the tarot is kind of clever for a sleuth because you have to be good at reading people when you're doing the
Yes.
cards and things like that. So you can look at people and say, okay, their alibi doesn't sound plausible or something's going on. It makes you a better sleuth.
Yeah. Yeah, she works that well, that angle well, without ever really saying for sure
Mhm.
that the supernatural answer is the answer. Yeah, she walks a great edge there.
The next book I'd like to share with you is nonfiction because sometimes I read more fiction than nonfiction, but occasionally it's fun to read something different, especially if it reads like fiction, which is the case with When Women Ran Fifth Avenue by Julie Satow. Now, Satow's previous book was about the Plaza Hotel in New York City. It was a bestseller. And that was fascinating because it was all about what went on in the hotel. In this particular book, she looks at three different women. One was Hortense Odlum, who took over Bonwit Teller. The other was Dorothy Shaver, who ran Lord and Taylor. And the third was Geraldine Stutz, who ran Henry Belden, which was a New York department store chain for a while. So she's got these three different characters. The book starts off in the 1920s. She looks at how each woman came into her own as a CEO of a corporation at a time when men really did.
I had no idea. I had no idea that those big department stores were run by women.
And basically, especially like Dorothy Shaver and Lord and Taylor, the store was failing. It was being run by almost all men, and they didn't have a clue as to what women wanted. And she went into the store and said, this is not what I don't want to see things here. You need to move this here. They each have these great ideas for like marketing and setting up individual boutiques and what should sell where and what their client was. So yeah, and yet they had to play the game and pretend that they were not smarter than the men, especially early on in their careers. They had to make it seem like they were not taking credit away from them. It's fascinating. It's got all these stories about New York City, the hotel business, not the hotel business, the department store business. And there's these little kind of details that I just love. In one of the chapters, it mentions this is about 1945, World War II is almost over, and there's this seemingly fashion trend that's sweeping New York. There's a show where they have all these models with these large hats made out of fabric. They're kind of parading up and down the walkway, and there's all this buzz about this being the next trend, and you have to hurry and leap onto it. It's fresh from Europe and things like that. It turns out the whole big hat fabric thing was manufactured by the Germans. They wanted America to invest more of their clothing production in these hats and pull it away from the military and things like that. So it was a whole scheme on the part of the Germans to try to divert resources from the US. And that's just like one little thing that the author drops into the story for that. So it goes from the 1920s to basically the 1970s, 1980s, when department stores were kind of hitting a rough spot with the closure of malls and things like that. So if you like nonfiction that reads like fiction, or if you're a fan of shows like the Project Runway, this is definitely the book for you. When Women Ran Fifth Avenue by Julie Satow.
That does sound good. Good, interesting history.
Yes.
Yeah.
The next book I have kind of illustrates the trend. We're kind of going back into paranormal and romance, but it's coming in different ways. It's not just the vampires and the shapeshifters, it's also kind of time travel and ghosts and the lighter touch of paranormal. The book is What's in a Kiss by Lauren Kate. And the protagonist is Liv Dusk. And Liv likes her life. I mean, she's not unhappy with it. She wanted to be an actress early on. That didn't pan out, but now she has a job that supports her. She has a good relationship with her mother. She and her mother are very good friends. Her mother has kind of a humorous podcast on self-help relationship books that Liv kind of grudgingly participates in with her because she doesn't believe in self-help books. She has a best friend whom she adores, and she's actually planning the wedding for her best friend, Masha. And the only thorn in Liv's side, as far as the wedding goes, is the best man happens to be Jake Glasswell. He's kind of been a nemesis of hers for years because Jake has the life, in a sense, that Liv wanted. He's a successful talk show host on late night TV. He's handsome, he's popular, people love him, he's funny, he's witty. Liv can't stand him. Um, last, the
I hate
last
talented people myself.
but she's trying to make a go of it for her best friend just for the wedding. But the last time Liv and Jake had any interaction was in high school in their prom because they actually had a date at night. And it didn't really go the way Liv expected. And then Jake kind of did the equivalent of ghosting her when it came time to kiss her at the prom. So that's where the kind of the antipathy towards him, the animosity towards him had started. So she's had this kind of relationship with Jake, and it's been building up, and it kind of destroys the wedding in a sense, and then something happens at the wedding, and Liv wakes up the next morning, and she's in this strange house she doesn't recognize. Jake's there. He greets her lovingly. He says, "Well, I'll go get your coffee ready. Are you ready for your start to your day?" and things like that. And she can't figure things out. And then she realizes she's basically traded lives with Jake. She's the successful talk show host. She's got the career. He's her house husband. There's all these things that she thought she wanted, that she now has. But in the process, she's also lost some things. Her relationship with her mother is not what it was previous to this. Her best friend can't stand her for some reason, Masha, and her beloved dog that she's made part of her family is nowhere to be found. So that's the idea behind What's in a Kiss. Could this kiss have changed her life? It's a sweet, it's funny, it's got lots of information about Los Angeles. If you thought there wasn't anything interesting in Los Angeles in terms of a setting, Lauren will dispel this of you because she really does understand the city and the business of Hollywood. And let's just say it's an interesting twist, almost on like Freaky Friday or something like that, where you trade places, get a different life. It's called What's in a Kiss by Lauren Kate. If you like contemporary romances with a little bit of paranormal twist, it's the book for you.
Another good there.
Yeah, it is. Um, Eliza Jane Frazier's new book coming soon is called It Had to Be You.
I've been looking at this one, so tell me about it. I've kind of,
Yeah, I wasn't sure because I've seen some of her other books and you don't know if it's just going to click with you as a reader or not, but this was one where they were said you have to review it. So I reviewed it and I discovered she really is a great writer. It starts out with Eva and Jonathan meeting on a train that's going from Florence to Paris. And it's lust at first sight between Eva and Jonathan. In fact, before you can say call the conductor, the two are in the baggage cabinet having a hot and heavy hookup that Brazier describes in quite steamy details. Let's just say she doesn't leave anything to the imagination. Well, of course, the two get off the train and they think they're going to see each other again. 6 months later, Eva's in Versailles, actually in the Hall of Mirrors. She's doing some work and she stumbles across Jonathan again. And it's at this point that they discover the two share more than just shared sexual attraction. They're both contract killers. And Eva's been hired to she's been hired to fulfill the contract, as has Jonathan. What they don't realize is they've been hired to eliminate the other. So that's the premise of the story.
What could
It's-
possibly go wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they can avoid killing each other, can they make their relationship work? I guess is the question. It sounds crazy. It's not ordinarily the kind of book I would like, but I was very impressed by the way I mean, she just, it's no hold bars. She takes on the danger, the suspense at full face. She doesn't flinch from the fact that they kill people for a living. The attraction between the two characters is not shied away from. So if you like romantic suspense that's a little bit on the softer side, this is not the book for you. If you like romantic suspense that is very much, I kind of like to think of it as it's an Alfred Hitchcock film, but with all the sex and violence right there on the screen.
Got it. Okay. Good. I'll take a look.
It Had to Be You by Eliza Jane Brashear. Did you want to do another one, Christina or Jane, before I?
Christina?
Um, this one's Susan Mallory, and this is very much like the Kristen Higgins John was talking about. Susan does women's fiction, but it's not that kind of women's fiction. She's got a real sense of humor and it comes right through. And she told me years ago, she said, the best thing you can do with a book is to put your heroine and your hero in the worst possible situation and then say, what's worse than this? And that's how you write it. In this one, we have our heroine who is a mother of a teenage girl, and the daughter's been going back and forth between her divorced parents, and she's very fond of the new stepmother who's pregnant. And then the father gets sent to prison, and the stepmother's destitute and she's pregnant. And the Summer, who's the daughter, says, we got to take her in. Like, it's the worst thing you can do. You've actually raised your daughter right. and now you're the one that's stuck in this situation. So it was charming, and it was, like you said, tears and laughter. And I'll really recommend this one. It was great. For the Love of Summer, Susan Mallory.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I like all of these books really that we're talking about are about women who are coming in, rediscovering their power or finding their power or finding their passion. They're growing. They're not static individuals. They're finding their agency.
That's a wonderful entry to the next book that I want to share with you. It's called Birding with Benefits by Sarah T. Dubb, because it is about a woman coming into her own. The woman is Celeste Johansson. Now, she's been married for a number of years, but she's finally gotten the divorce that she deserves and needs. So she's done with her ex-husband. Their daughter is about to go off to college, so she's successfully taking care of her child and as they launch into their part of their life. So now is time for Celeste. She wants to experience life. She wants to do things for herself. She wants to enjoy her life. And so she's going to say yes to new opportunities. So when Celeste's friend asked her if she would be willing to essentially be a faux date for one of his friends, Celeste thinks, why not? I mean, what's she got to lose? It's a chance to get to know someone, new opportunity. So she says, of course. She shows up and meets the friend, John McGuire, and says, I'm here to be your fake relationship. And the man, John McGuire, looks at her kind of puzzled and says, I don't understand. He goes, well, their friend had said you needed someone to be your partner. And John looks at her and says, not romantic partner. I need a partner for a bird watching contest. So that sets up their interaction. And at first Celeste is like, well, no, that's not what I signed up for, especially since she knows nothing about bird watching. Why on earth would she want to do this? But she wants to help John out because he wants to win this contest. It will launch him professionally as a bird watcher. So she agrees to do it. After all they have to do is be together for 6 weeks, watch some birds, convince people that they're together. And what's the worst that could happen? Well, the worst is they might actually fall in love. And that's the premise behind Birding with Benefits by Sarah T. Dubb. It's fun in so many different ways. I'm not a bird watcher. I don't think I ever really would care about watching birds, but the author actually makes that particular pastime pursuit seem interesting. It's also got older protagonists. These are not a hero and heroine in their 20s or 30s. They're in their 40s. So they've lived a little bit. They've experienced life, and it's interesting to see that they can fall in love too. And for me, it was also interesting because it's set in Arizona, southern Arizona, around the Tucson area. So you don't often see books in the,
Roadrunners.
yeah, where roadrunners are. So there's a lot about that. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, it's a wonderful debut. She knows her area. She lives in Tucson. She knows birds, but it's also got some great characters.
Birds are kind of hot right now.
Yeah, Amy Tan did that whole book on bird watching.
Yeah, I just read one on owls, and then of course there was the famous, was it Barney, the owl that sadly died in New York?
Oh,
The one that was living in Central Park.
that's right.
Yeah, yeah. Just kind of more aware of birds right now.
Well, the next book I have actually came based on a recommendation from a mutual friend of ours, Jayne at Berkeley, and it's called The Love of My Afterlife by Christy Greenwood. As far as Delphi Bookham is concerned, it's bad enough that she's died and is now stuck in heaven's waiting room. What's even worse is how she died. She choked on a microwave hamburger. And when she died, she was dressed in her worst possible comfortable nightgown that she doesn't want anyone to see her in. So now she's stuck in heaven's waiting room, waiting to be processed when she meets Merritt, who's kind of like her counselor there. And Merritt's explaining what's going to go on, what's going to happen. And then she also meets this charming, wonderful gentleman who's kind of going through the waiting room as well. And they hit it off and they click immediately. But it turns out the man was there accidentally. He was just there because he was having dental surgery done. They put him under anesthetic and he briefly kind of slipped, I guess, the earthly bonds and came up to heaven. But now they're setting it right and sending him back. But poor Delphi is stuck there. She's finally met the man that she thinks she deserves, the man of her life, the man she could love forever, and he's going back to Earth and she's stuck in heaven. So she makes a deal with Merritt, the counselor. If Merritt will let her go back to Earth, and she can find this man just based on his first name and that he lives in London, meet him and kiss him within 10 days. She can stay back on Earth and she can be with him. So that sets up the story. And she goes back to London and she has to figure out how to find this guy. And she, of course, needs some help from her surly upstairs apartment. I can't think of the word. The person who lives in the apartment above her, surly man who's always been kind of rude to her and things like that. But of course, if you're a romance reader, you know what's going to happen there. That's the premise of the story. It's funny, it's charming, it's got that kind of British sense of humor and wit. I love that Merritt, the counselor in Heaven's Waiting Room, is a romance reader. She loves romances, so she's always dropping titles into the conversation. That's why she wants Delphi to succeed, because she wants her to have her happily ever after. So if you're looking for a paranormal that's a little bit different, slightly unique, filled with whimsy, a little bit of wit, The Love of My Afterlife by Christy Greenwood is out now, and it's definitely a fun summer read.
Great title.
It is. Jayne, did you have another before I wrap up?
Well, there was this one that kind of went fleetingly past.
Yes.
You don't have to do that one. Why don't you do the other one?
Christina Dodd's A Daughter of Fair Verona. Absolutely delightful fan fiction of the ultimate. You can't get any higher than doing Romeo and Juliet and doing it right, getting the ending right. What'd you think, John?
Wonderful setting, unique setting, wonderful sense of humor, great characters. It's everything you want. I mean, not that there is anyone left who hasn't read it yet, but if you haven't, now's your chance. It's here for the summer. There's probably something coming again soon in the series, so you'll want to get started on it now.
And there are signed copies available from the Poison Pen, and I happen to know that because I got my signed copy from the
I think we have like 2 left, so if you want one, you better get it now
Okay.
after the program. I think we're almost out of time, but I'll end with one that I loved. Really, I enjoyed all of her books. She's an author who writes mystery and romance and relationship fiction. It's Jen McKinley. The book is called Love at First Book. Our protagonist is Emily Allen. She's a librarian in New England. And she's just gotten the chance of a lifetime, something she's always dreamed of. She's been offered the opportunity to go work for her favorite author in the world, and I'm going to totally mess up the author's name because it's Irish, but it's Seal Behan Jordan or something like that. We'll just call her the author. But this is the author that changed Emily's life. She did a fantasy series that Emily had been reading for decades, and then all of a sudden, when it came time for the next book, there's a 10-year gap. Nothing's been published. But Emily's going to go to this village. She's going to work there with the author, kind of be her assistant, and maybe she can kind of nudge her along, get her to finish that last book so they can have some conclusion, a sense of
Closure.
closure. Thank you, Jayne, for that. Well, there's a downside to the job because when she gets to the little village in Ireland, she's not just working with the author, she also has to spend her afternoons working in the village bookshop with the author's son, who happens to be a total jerk as far as Emily is concerned. He's rude, he's surly, he's not happy that Emily's there. Well, you can imagine what's going to happen as the summer goes on. That's the setup of the story. But what I love about Jen McKinley's books is she's got a unique sense of humor. It's kind of woven into the story. In the case of Love at First Book, it's also about how we as readers fall in love with the series.
Yeah.
Want to see them through to their conclusion, how much they mean to us, because this book really has meant a lot to Emily, and you can see that. I'm thinking in some ways she's kind of almost riffing off the Harry Potter series, and this is how that influenced so many people's lives and readers' reactions to it. It's got humor, it's got sweet romance, it's got a wonderful Irish setting. If you're into all of that, I can recommend Love at First Book by Jen McKinley.
Sounds
And
great.
I'll throw in one last one too. Secrets of Rosebriar Hall by Kelsey James. And this is a particularly, I thought, fast-moving, quick moving, because a lot of Gothics are slow at the beginning because of the setup, as you and I discussed before. But this one, the pacing just hits the ground running, and it's a perfect twist on the gaslighting Gothic. So if you love that kind of spooky gaslighting thing, and is somebody trying to make me crazy, or am I really crazy kind of story, Secrets of Rosebriar Hall worked for me for that kind of story. I really liked it.
She's a great author, and her book before that was actually set in Italy in the film industry too, which is kind of interesting. It was a Gothic kind of take on movies.
Yeah. Any last words, Christina?
Oh, I'm done. This was fascinating. I've got a whole list of notes from John's books, and it's going to cost me a fortune.
When can we expect something from each of you as a reader? What comes next, Jayne?
Well, in January, I've got the conclusion to my Lost Night Files trilogy. It's called Shattering Dawn. Just got the covers just came out. And that's the conclusion of a trilogy. So I'm kind of looking for new places to go.
What about Jayne Castle? What is she doing?
That's the book that's out now, People in Glass Houses, which is Christine and I were discussing earlier today, would probably not be a good idea down in Scottsdale right now.
Really burning.
I had a vision of glass houses in Scottsdale. I thought, no.
What about you, Christina? What comes next?
In March, I've got Girl Anonymous, which is a suspense, and I have don't tell anybody because I haven't told anybody yet, but the second book in the Daughter of Montague series is Thus With a Kiss I Die.
Oh, wow.
I think Hamlet.
That's great. Now, of course, we don't have to remind your viewers, but I will. It's never too early to pre-order. You can always order a book early.
Yep.
And I will remind them that all of these books are available at the Poison Pen, and there are links, convenient links, over on Christina's website.
And I will post the link to my website so that you can get right there and buy mini books.
This has been great. Thank you so much, both of you. I've got a long list here.
Yeah, I do too. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, John.
Jayne. It's
And
great.
John is always available for personal recommendations, just get in touch with him at the Poison Pen. No problem.
Happy to do that.
All right. Happy summer to everybody
You
Happy-
too.
and happy reading.
Happy reading. Bye.